So now I can start working back to my line, and I'll actually we switch to a little bit wider bench chisel. And initially, well, I mean, ideally what I want to do is be, I guess, exactly perpendicular to the face of this wood, but in practice I'll be a little bit re-entrant. In other words, I'll come, you know, let me go over here so you can see it better. Instead of coming straight down, I'll actually angle the chisel back into the wood slightly so that this surface is nice and crisp and clean, but I don't have any binding then when the pins, when the tails slide into the pins. So just think of that, I guess. The other thing to consider is start with your chisel really orthogonal to the surface of the wood, and the bevel of the chisel itself will drive the chisel to be a little bit re-entrant. So start with it nice and perpendicular, and then as you hammer the chisel down or mallet the chisel down, it'll kind of dive back into the wood. That's a good technique. But those scribe lines, if you made those scribe lines nice and deep, you just register your chisel right in those scribe lines. That works great. Okay, that side is pretty much done. Come back and do the same thing here. And here you would just want to be careful not to push the chisel out the backside. You're only really trying to go half the thickness of the thickness of the piece of wood, because you've already come at this from the other way. If you tear the wood a lot, you're cutting cross grain now. If you tear the wood a lot, go sharpen your bench chisels. You really want to be slicing the wood, not tearing it. All right. So at this point, I should be able to get all these pieces out of here. I should slide out. I'm going to zoom this out a little bit. So the last thing I'll do is just clean up this area in between. And again, I'm just kind of emphasizing that this is slightly re-entrant, so I'm pushing down towards the middle. Maybe a 32nd of an inch. Let's go in here and clean things up a little bit. The stuff that binds when you assemble the dovetail is if you've left any material kind of at the interface between this angle and the bottom, that tends to bind. So just make sure you've got that all cleaned up. I could stand to sharpen this chisel. I see I got quite a bit of tearing. And then lastly, go clean up to your scribe lines on that area that you sawed off. Ask me what sort of chisels to use, what sort of saw to use, and I don't think it matters that much. I happen to like the Western back saws, but a Japanese saw will work fine. They'll both register on your lines and cut straight. Chisels, you can spend a lot of money on Lee Nielsen or Blue Spruce or other Ashley Isles. But I think if you have a sharp chisel, the marples that you buy at the home stores will probably be fine. Just really make sure you get a nice sharp edge I can go over sharpening in another video, but whether you do this on a whetstone or you use a grinder, just make sure that that edge is honed well. Slices, you can see on these dovetails, it's kind of rough inside of these. It really tore the wood. This one and this one, it looks like it sliced the wood better, so these are probably ready for some sharpening. But learn how to sharpen the chisels, and you should be fine. I like the File Swiss-made bench chisels. They seem to be a nice blend of good tool steel, easy to keep a sharp edge and maintain a sharp edge, and don't break the bank. So that's my preference. It's just, but they happen to be what I started with, so I'm comfortable with them. Marking gauges, likewise, I think I mentioned before that I like the knife edge gauges for cutting these or marking these dovetails. This is an inexpensive one, Luban. I think it's probably from China or Japan. Nothing fancy, but it really cuts nice and does well. Just keep this blade sharp. You can find antiques as well that do a great job. So next step now is to register this bottom piece onto our case sides and transfer the tail dimensions or the tail edges onto the case side and cut out the pins. So let's do that. Alright, so I've taken the case side and I've clamped it in the bench. This is the back edge, and remember on the bottom, I think I'll put this on the inside. On the bottom, I want, or on the back, excuse me, I want the bottom piece to not extend all the way to the case side, because this is where the false back needs to be able to move in and out. That'll become obvious once we assemble this. And then on the front, I want the front edge to be in the same plane as the front edge of the side. So start there, line up the front edge nicely, and then line up these inside shoulders here with the inside of the case sides. Now, one technique or one trick that you can use is also to lay a straight edge on your bench and kind of get an orthogonal line with respect to the clamp, that you can line the side up. That way it's registered, it's not cockeyed. But usually if you just get these inside shoulders to be flush with the inside of your case sides, you're fine. Now at this point you want to transfer these marks or these tails onto the case sides. There's a couple of ways to do it. I would not recommend using a pencil. Use an X-Acto knife or a marking gauge. The problem with the X-Acto knife for a thick piece of material like this pine bottom is that it's hard to get in here and get the line registered off the edge, because your X-Acto is tipping one. Well, let's put it this way. It's hard to get it in here and get it through that opening. So there's marking gauge. Blue Spruce makes a nice one. This is a new one by File. Just got this at Woodcraft. I think it was $14 or something. The nice thing about it is that it's thicker than the thickness of your bottom, and so you can ride this flat edge right along the saw mark, right along the sawed surface. So I think this is a great way to transfer these marks. So hold this piece in place. Don't let it move around. Make sure that the front edge is lined up with the front edge of the side. And just transfer these marks. Get them nice and deep. All right, and there we're left with kind of an exact transfer of the tails on the bottom to the pins on the side.